I've collected 120 shocking historical photos that you might have missed. Let's take a closer look at them. On March 17, 1953, the Annie nuclear test detonated over Yucca Flat, Nevada, producing a 16-kiloton blast and a towering cloud. Winds carried radioactive fallout east into Utah, exposing communities later known as downwinders and leaving a lasting Cold War health legacy. In July 1889, homesteaders Ella Watson and James Averill were seized and lynched near Wyoming's Sweetwater River by powerful cattlemen. Watson was later branded Cattle Kate, but historians now regard that outlaw image as a smear used to justify the killings. In 1958, Greek police arrested these young men after they threw yogurt at a woman, charging them under law 4,000. Their heads were shaved, their trouser cuffs cut off, and they were paraded through Athens with signs naming their offense. Born in 1919, microbiologist Maurice Hilleman developed more than 40 vaccines, including those for measles, mumps, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, and chickenpox. His work transformed modern public health and protected generations from diseases that had once caused widespread death and disability. In 1965, Angus Barbieri began a medically supervised fast that lasted 382 days, supported by drinks, vitamins, and electrolytes. By July 1966, his weight had fallen from 456 pounds to 180 pounds, setting a record for fasting without solid food. During the Battle of Loos in 1915, a soldier stands inside a narrow Western Front trench wearing an early gas respirator. The battle saw Britain's first large-scale chlorine gas attack, making protective masks essential for troops on both sides. Born in Hamburg, the McCarthy sisters debuted in London in 1893 before touring the United States 4 years later. Julia, Adelaide, and Cecilia combined high-wire acrobatics with dancing and live music, often playing instruments while suspended above the crowd. In Pittsburgh in 1952, a young boy clings to his father before the soldier leaves for duty during the Korean War. His mother stands behind them as the family shares a final station goodbye, capturing the private cost of a conflict fought thousands of miles from home. Taken at Newby Church in Yorkshire in 1963, this photograph became famous for a towering hooded figure beside the altar. Later examinations found no clear sign of double exposure, but the figure's identity and apparent height remain unexplained. In 1983, Soviet Typhoon-class submarine TK-202 was prepared for commissioning inside a vast covered shipyard, dwarfing workers on its deck. Built for the Cold War nuclear fleet, vessels of this class remain the largest submarines ever constructed anywhere in the world. In 1943, Allied aircraft struck the Japanese base at Madang on New Guinea's northern coast, sending smoke across the harbor and shoreline. The raid targeted airfields, ships, and supply facilities supporting Japan's campaign in the South Pacific. In 1955, photographer Eve Arnold captured this Kodachrome portrait at a playground in Mount Sinai, Long Island. The relaxed session promoted the 7-year itch and revealed a playful, unguarded side rarely seen in the actress's carefully staged publicity. On July 19, 1943, Pope Pius XII entered Rome's bombed San Lorenzo district after the first major Allied air raid on the capital. Surrounded by stunned residents, he offered prayers and aid among ruins left by an attack that killed about 1,500 people and wounded thousands. In 1935, passengers traveled from Britain to Australia aboard connecting Imperial Airways and Qantas aircraft, not Eastern Airlines. The journey lasted about 12 days and required dozens of stops across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. In Sweden in 1888, a blacksmith shapes heated metal beneath a steam-powered hammer built around a massive wooden beam. Captured on a glass negative, the workshop shows how 19th-century industry combined heavy machinery with simple timber engineering. In 1919, 3 Chinese laborers who helped build the first transcontinental railroad were honored at its 50th anniversary. Their work through the Sierra Nevada was vital to the Central Pacific, yet thousands of Chinese workers received little public recognition. From 1886 to 1894, British performer Etta Lake became known for stretching the unusually elastic skin of her face, a trait linked to a connective tissue disorder. Despite her fame, she avoided interviews, leaving almost nothing known about her early life or years after the stage. On September 20, 1932, 11 ironworkers ate lunch on a steel beam 850 feet above Manhattan during construction of Rockefeller Center. Taken as a publicity image during the Great Depression, the photograph became an enduring symbol of risk, labor, and New York ambition. Adopted by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk in 1925, Sabiha Gökçen entered military flight training and became Turkey's first female military pilot in 1936. She flew combat missions the following year and later became widely recognized as the world's first female fighter pilot. In eastern Afghanistan in 1988, a Mujahideen fighter aims a United States-supplied Stinger missile at a Soviet aircraft overhead. Portable Stingers gave resistance forces a powerful defense against helicopters and low-flying jets, sharply increasing Soviet air losses. In July 1935, Nazi activists and SA men terrorized Berlin's Kurfürstendamm, attacking Jewish cafes, smashing windows, and beating patrons. Police largely failed to stop the violence, turning public intimidation into a weapon for forcing Jews out of city life. In June 1944, a Japanese aircraft falls toward the sea after being hit while attacking the escort carrier USS Kitkun Bay near the Mariana Islands. The carrier survived the Battle of the Philippine Sea, where American forces destroyed hundreds of Japanese planes. In 1937, Italo-Hungarian photographer Gita Karel created this carefully staged portrait of Benito Mussolini to project authority and control. One of Italy's leading portraitists, Karel photographed prominent politicians, aristocrats, and members of the fascist elite. On March 31, 1973, Ken Norton broke Muhammad Ali's jaw and defeated him by split decision in San Diego. Ali fought much of the bout injured, while Norton's awkward style made him one of the few rivals who consistently troubled the former champion. In March 1974, Japanese officer Hiro Onoda emerged from the Philippine jungle after nearly 29 years, still believing the war continued. He surrendered only after his former commander personally relieved him of duty, making him one of Japan's last wartime holdouts. Around 1900, New Yorkers celebrated Thanksgiving with masks, costumes, and street parades in a tradition known as Ragamuffin Day. Children dressed as clowns, sailors, and beggars, asking neighbors for coins and treats before the custom faded in the 1920s. Japanese Yakuza members display elaborate full-body irizumi, traditionally applied by hand and hidden beneath ordinary clothing. These tattoos symbolized loyalty, endurance, and underworld identity, but they were never required of every member or spouse. After the Allied breakthrough at Monte Cassino in May 1944, some Moroccan Goumiers serving with the French army attacked civilians across Italy's Ciociaria region. Thousands of women and men reported sexual violence, beatings, and killings, though the exact number of victims remains disputed. In 1946, Japanese soldiers faced a British military court in Rangoon for the Calagon massacre, where hundreds of Burmese villagers were killed in July 1945. The case became one of the most significant war crimes trials held in Burma after Japan's surrender. On October 14, 1912, Theodore Roosevelt was shot in Milwaukee, but a folded speech and metal eyeglass case slowed the bullet. He still spoke for about 84 minutes before treatment, and doctors left the bullet in his chest for the rest of his life. In 1924, American confidence trickster Vera Crichton posed as a new neighbor to enter apartments before quietly stealing valuables. She also helped rob jewelry stores by distracting employees and customers while her accomplices carried out the theft. Photographed in the 1890s, Alois Hitler was an Austrian customs official and the father of Adolf Hitler. Born Alois Schicklgruber in 1837, he adopted the surname Hitler in 1876 and spent nearly 4 decades serving the Habsburg Customs Administration before retiring in 1895. On June 28, 1970, an elephant named Vova escaped from Yerevan Zoo and wandered through the streets of Soviet Armenia. After attempts to drive him back failed, armed troops surrounded and killed the animal, ending an hours-long crisis watched by thousands of residents. Taken in July 1973, this is one of the final known photographs of Bruce Lee, captured only days before his death in Hong Kong at age 32. On July 20th, he died after a sudden cerebral edema, just 6 days before Enter the Dragon was released in the United States. In 1955, soldiers sat inside a tank just 5 kilometers from a nuclear detonation during Exercise Desert Rock in Nevada. Between 1951 and 1957, about 37,000 troops trained there to fight on atomic battlefields and observe blast effects on men, vehicles, and equipment. In May 1945, captured German generals stand under guard after the fall of Berlin and the collapse of Nazi command in the capital in Europe. Their surrender marked the end of organized resistance in the city, only days before Germany's unconditional capitulation across Europe. In the early 1930s, Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow cleaned their weapons at a roadside camp while hiding from police across the American Southwest. The pair led the notorious Barrow Gang, linked to robberies, stolen cars, and several killings before their fatal 1934 ambush. In Soviet Tajikistan in the 1970s, a groom completes the paperwork to register his marriage while the bride sits beside him with her face covered. The scene captures the meeting of Soviet civil law with long-standing local wedding customs and family traditions in Central Asia. In September 1924, floodwaters from the Neva swept across Leningrad's Nevsky Prospect, tearing up pavement and stranding cars. The disaster became one of the city's worst floods, submerging streets, damaging thousands of buildings, and leaving central Leningrad underwater. In 1983, Pakistani women burned their headscarves during a protest against General Zia-ul-Haq's Islamization policies and limits on women's rights. The demonstration became a powerful symbol of resistance to laws that expanded religious control over public and private life. During 17th-century plague outbreaks, some European doctors wore waxed robes, gloves, and beaked masks filled with aromatic herbs. The costume was designed to block bad air, reflecting the widely accepted miasma theory used before germs and bacteria were understood. On February 14, 1945, mourners gathered in Prague for victims of an American air raid that mistakenly struck the Nazi-occupied city. 40 bombers dropped 152 tons of explosives, killing more than 700 civilians and damaging homes, hospitals, churches, and historic landmarks. During a polio quarantine, a mother lies beside a basement window to read to her 6-year-old daughter without entering the room. The image captures how families preserved comfort and routine while strict isolation separated sick children from their parents. In 1904, Swedish sailor Carl Emil Pettersson survived the wreck of the Herzog Johann Albrecht and reached Tabor Island. He later married the local ruler's daughter, built a coconut plantation, and became known as the island's White King. In 1935, Nicoleta Nicolescu, leader of the Iron Guard's Women's Wing, directs a fascist salute at a Romanian summer camp. Later arrested as a threat to national security, she was tortured for months and killed in custody in 1939 during King Carol II's crackdown on the movement. In 1934, 17-year-old Walter Lunger lay in an Innsbruck hospital after a bomb planted by Austrian Nazi militants destroyed his right hand. The attack formed part of a violent campaign using bombings and intimidation to destabilize Austria before its annexation by Nazi Germany. On June 22, 1941, German Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop announced that Germany was at war with the Soviet Union. His statement accompanied Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history, opening the brutal Eastern Front and involving millions of troops. On June 28, 1880, an Australian police officer poses in the homemade iron armor seized from outlaw Ned Kelly after the siege at Glenrowan. The full suit weighed about 44 kilograms and protected Kelly from bullets until police shot his unarmored legs and captured him alive. During China's Cultural Revolution, students and Red Guards publicly denounced teachers labeled counter-revolutionary. Many educators were forced into humiliating struggle sessions, beaten, imprisoned, or sent to labor camps as schools became centers of political persecution. In this family photograph, Rich Bundy stands in front of his older brother Ted, years before Ted Bundy became one of America's most notorious killers. The ordinary snapshot gained a chilling context after his 1975 arrest exposed the hidden double life behind the family image. During the 1991 Kurdish uprising in northern Iraq, Peshmerga fighters' guard captured Iraqi soldiers as Saddam Hussein's forces lost control of major towns. The revolt followed the Gulf War but was crushed within weeks, forcing hundreds of thousands of Kurds toward the borders. In 1955, former U.S. Army Sergeant Isaac J. Hurt was convicted of abducting, assaulting, and killing 5-year-old Yumiko Nagayama in Okinawa, and was sentenced to death. The case triggered the island's earliest major protests against the post-war American military presence. In 1979, twin actresses Lisa and Louise Burns relaxed between takes while filming Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Their brief appearance as the Grady sisters became one of cinema's most unforgettable images, although the girls were cheerful and playful together off-camera. On September 28, 1938, a London police officer wore a gas mask during an emergency drill as the Munich crisis pushed Europe toward war. His sign asked, "Have you got yours?" reflecting fears that enemy aircraft might soon bring poison gas and bombing to British cities. Between 1927 and 1929, members of the Soviet League of Militant Atheists publicly burned religious icons in the Moscow region. Their banners called for a new life without religion, reflecting the state campaign to close churches, seize sacred objects, and suppress worship. Issued on December 4, 1940, this identity card belonged to Annie Yolande Horowitz, a 7-year-old Jewish girl born in Strasbourg in 1933. Later deported from occupied France, she was murdered at Auschwitz, leaving this document as one of the few surviving traces of her life. David Harold, Lewis Powell, Mary Surratt, and George Atzerodt were convicted for roles in the plot that killed Abraham Lincoln. All 4 were executed in Washington on July 7, 1865, with Surratt becoming the first woman put to death by the United States federal government. On June 6, 1989, an estimated 10 million mourners packed a 20-mile route through Tehran for the funeral of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. The crowd overwhelmed security in extreme heat, forcing officials to halt the burial. At least 8 people died, and thousands were injured. In 1934, a towering black blizzard sweeps across South Dakota, turning daylight into darkness as drought-stricken topsoil fills the sky. Such storms devastated farms across the Great Plains and helped define the Dust Bowl, forcing thousands of families from their land. Near Leningrad in 1941, a wounded Luftwaffe bomber crew stands together after their aircraft was apparently shot down during fighting on the Eastern Front. Their bandaged heads and hands show the immediate cost of air combat during Germany's advance toward the besieged city. In northern China around 1900, hunters display massive matchlock guns mounted on wooden supports, weapons built to fire heavy loads at large game. Their size made them difficult to carry and slow to use, and many were restricted or prohibited by local authorities at the time. During the Battle of Taiyuan in 1938, a Chinese soldier fastens a vest of hand grenades onto a volunteer preparing to attack Japanese tanks. Such close-range assaults reflected China's desperate effort to stop Japan's armored advance during the Second Sino-Japanese War. During the Pacific War in the 1940s, exhausted American Marines paused for coffee after intense fighting, their faces blackened by smoke and mud. The brief rest reveals the strain of island combat, where heat, fatigue, and constant danger wore soldiers down between attacks. The Shan mantle, or barrel of shame, was a public punishment device used in parts of Europe from the early modern period onward. Offenders were forced to wear the heavy wooden barrel while crowds mocked and insulted them, turning humiliation itself into part of the sentence. In 1897, Congolese men, women, and children were placed in a reconstructed village at Belgium's Tervuren exhibition and observed by visitors. The display presented living people as colonial curiosities, exposing racism that underpinned King Leopold II's rule in the Congo. In March 1921, IRA prisoners Patrick Moran and Thomas Whelan shook hands inside Mountjoy Prison shortly before their execution. Both men were hanged on March 14th for alleged roles in attacks on British intelligence officers during the Irish War of Independence. In 1916, factory workers assembled rows of prosthetic legs for soldiers who lost limbs during the First World War. The crowded workshop reveals the industrial scale of wartime injury, as doctors and craftsmen struggled to return thousands of wounded men to civilian life. On January 27, 1945, Red Army soldiers entered Auschwitz, Birkenau, and Monowitz, freeing about 7,000 sick and malnourished prisoners. The liberation took place after fierce fighting with retreating German troops, during which 231 Soviet soldiers died in the camp complex and its surroundings. During the Second World War, German servicemen were often buried with formal military honors, including an honor guard, flags, and music from a military band. The ceremony, attended by officers and comrades, reinforced ideals of discipline, sacrifice, and loyalty, even in death. In Warsaw, in October 1940, Nazi authorities introduced segregated tramcars marked only for Jews in both German and Polish across occupied Warsaw. The measure deepened daily humiliation and isolation before the city's Jewish population was confined inside the sealed Warsaw Ghetto. Around 1954, New Zealand practitioner Jennifer Hickling demonstrates a firm spinal manipulation on a patient lying across a padded table. The treatment reflects mid-century manual therapy, when physical adjustments were commonly used to treat back pain and joint problems. On December 16, 1960, a United Airlines DC-8 collided with a TWA superconstellation over New York during landing approaches. Both aircraft crashed in Brooklyn and Staten Island, killing 128 people aboard and 6 on the ground in the deadliest aviation disaster of its time. On December 3, 1967, surgeon Christian Barnard performed the first successful human-to-human heart transplant at Groote Schuur Hospital in Cape Town. Recipient Louis Washkansky survived for 18 days before dying from pneumonia after intensive immune-suppressing treatment. In Minnesota in 1942, this Marine had enlisted at 17 after claiming he was 18, then served 6 years as a tail gunner during the Second World War. He wore his Marine Corps ring every day for the rest of his life, preserving a link to the service that shaped him. In 1965, Dutch models Sonja Bakker and Femke van de Bosch pose among commuters inside the Moscow metro. Their modern Western outfits sharply contrast with the winter clothing around them, turning an ordinary station platform into a striking Cold War fashion scene of the era. Photographed outdoors by Diane Arbus, Sandra D. Reed and her sister pose with wind-blown hair. Both women were born with albinism. Sandra later became a celebrated sword swallower and earned a Guinness World Record in 1977 after training under expert performer Ricky Ricciardi. In Sweden in 1899, a young couple shares a quiet moment on a wooden lakeside dock, captured on a fragile glass negative. Their relaxed pose and fashionable clothing offer an intimate glimpse of courtship, leisure, and everyday rural life at the end of the 19th century. In the 1960s, Josephine Baker posed in uniform, wearing the medals she earned for serving the French resistance during the Second World War. The celebrated dancer carried secret messages for Allied intelligence and later received the Croix de Guerre and French Legion of Honor. In 1928, sailors hauled a newly built fishing boat through the narrow streets of Port Isaac, Cornwall, before launching it into the harbor. With no direct route from the boatyard to the sea, the vessel had to be carefully guided by hand between tightly packed stone houses. Italian sculptor Silvio Gazzaniga holds the FIFA World Cup trophy he designed after winning an international competition in 1971. First awarded at the 1974 tournament in West Germany, the 36.8-centimeter gold trophy has represented football's greatest prize ever since. In July 1944, a U.S. Army M10 Wolverine tank destroyer advances through smoke during the fierce Battle of Saint-Lô in Normandy, France. Armed with a 3-inch gun, the lightly armored vehicle was built to hunt German tanks and support the American breakout from the dense bocage. Carved into Afghanistan's Bamiyan cliffs in the 6th century, this was one of 2 colossal Buddha statues that stood for nearly 1,500 years. In March 2001, the Taliban destroyed both monuments with explosives, erasing one of Central Asia's greatest treasures of Buddhist art. Born in Boise, Idaho on July 19, 1946, George Frayne IV became Commander Cody, pianist and frontman of Commander Cody and his Lost Planet Airmen. The band fused country, rock and roll, western swing, and rockabilly, scoring its biggest hit with Hot Rod Lincoln in 1972. In South Vietnam's Mekong Delta, a soldier questions 2 suspected Viet Cong fighters at gunpoint after they were searched and bound. Photographer Horst Foss captured the tense field interrogation during the Vietnam War before the prisoners were taken to join other detainees. During filming of Labyrinth in 1986, this towering set was built for the Helping Hand scene using more than 100 latex hands. Performers hidden behind the walls controlled each hand as Sarah, played by Jennifer Connelly, appeared to fall through a living tunnel on screen. In Persia around 1890, a prisoner undergoes falaka, a punishment in which the soles were beaten while the legs were tied to a wooden pole. Used by courts, schools, and officials across the region, it caused intense pain while leaving relatively few visible injuries on the body. On March 14, 1938, an Austrian crowd in Salzburg cheers a German non-commissioned officer 2 days after Nazi troops entered the country. The enthusiastic welcome became a defining image of the Anschluss, which ended Austria's independence and brought it under Hitler's rule. A Red Army soldier secures a Mosin rifle to the barrel of a 76mm ZIS 3 field gun during a training session. The improvised setup let crews practice aiming and check alignment with cheap rifle cartridges instead of firing scarce and far more powerful artillery shells. In Belarus in the 1930s, a traditional Kalyati performer wears a carved wooden mask and carries an animal figure while visiting village homes. The winter ritual blended old folk customs with Christmas songs, costumes, and wishes for health and prosperity in the coming year. In 1891, a prisoner at the Nerchinsk penal colony in Siberia lies chained to the wheelbarrow he was forced to use during hard labor. Such restraints were designed to prevent escape, turning the convict's work tool into a constant symbol of punishment and control, day and night. At -43 degrees Celsius, Yellowstone's Old Faithful erupts beneath a towering plume of steam, photographed by a park ranger in the early 1960s. The geyser can send near-boiling water up to 42 meters high, while extreme cold turns its vapor into an enormous white column. From February 3rd to 9th, 1972, Iran endured one of the deadliest blizzards ever recorded, with snowdrifts reaching up to 8 meters. Entire villages were buried, rescue teams could not reach many communities, and more than 4,000 people died before floods followed the thaw. On October 30, 1961, the crew of a Tu-95V bomber saw the sky turn red as the Soviet Union detonated Tsar Bomba over Novaya Zemlya, 39 kilometers away. The 50-megaton blast was the most powerful nuclear explosion ever created, and its shockwave circled Earth 3 times. In the United States in 1956, a condemned prisoner sits strapped into an electric chair as officials document the procedure on film. The stark image captures a rarely seen prison ritual, since cameras were normally forbidden inside American execution chambers at the time. At the 1976 Montreal Olympics, Japanese guard Sachio Yamamoto faces Soviet center Uljana Semjonova, who stood 2.10 meters tall. The Soviet Union won 98-75, completed the first Olympic women's basketball tournament unbeaten, and captured the sport's inaugural gold medal. During Prohibition in the 1920s, a woman displays bottles strapped beneath her coat inside a crowded bar, showing how liquor was concealed despite the ban. Hidden flasks and speakeasies helped turn illegal drinking into a vast underground business across the United States. During the Second World War, Germany tested the Windkanone, an experimental weapon designed to fire compressed air vortices at low-flying aircraft. Tests showed it could disturb targets at short range, but poor accuracy and limited power kept it from practical military use. During the Vietnam War, civilians hide chest-deep in a swamp while armed patrols move through the surrounding brush nearby. Families often fled villages for forests, tunnels, and wetlands where mud and vegetation offered concealment from gunfire, searches, and air attacks. On August 28, 1988, 3 jets from Italy's Frecce Tricolori collided before thousands of spectators at Ramstein Air Base in West Germany. Within seconds, one aircraft crashed into the crowd, killing 70 people and injuring hundreds in one of history's deadliest airshow disasters. In New Jersey in 1942, Ku Klux Klan leader Arthur Bell shakes hands with August Klaproth of the pro-Nazi German-American Bund while discussing cooperation. The meeting was denounced as treasonous, and the Klan removed Bell from office and reported him to federal authorities. Between September 5 and 6, 1944, Allied bombers devastated Le Havre, destroying much of the city center while German forces held the port. More than 2,000 civilians were killed, and tens of thousands left homeless before British troops captured the city during Operation Estonia. In Cardiff in December 1960, firefighters practiced rescuing a person from a narrow shaft using a chain hoist and a protective barrel harness. The unusual device supported the body during lifting, allowing crews to raise trapped victims safely from wells or confined spaces. During the 1980s, investigations exposed secret United States radiation experiments in which patients and civilians were dosed without informed consent. The revelations triggered outrage, federal reviews, and demands for accountability over decades of hidden medical research. On April 9, 1989, Soviet troops dispersed a peaceful independence rally outside the government building in Tbilisi, Georgia. Soldiers used clubs and toxic gas, killing 21 people, mostly women, and turning the crackdown into a defining moment in Georgia's drive for independence. In 1944, soldiers cross a river on a narrow toggle rope bridge as simulated artillery bursts send water high around them. The exercise trained troops to move under battlefield pressure, testing their balance, discipline, and teamwork during a dangerous crossing. In the United States in 1927, police photographed a group of suspected criminals dressed in women's clothing after a raid. Authorities believed the disguises helped them avoid recognition, enter crowded venues, and move through public spaces without attracting suspicion. On May 1, 1933, members of a Hitler Youth brass band rest beside Berlin's Lustgarten during Nazi May Day celebrations. Their uniforms and instruments show how the regime quickly used youth groups, music, and public spectacle to spread loyalty and discipline among young Germans. On May 8, 1945, Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel and the German delegation arrive at Karlshorst, Berlin, to sign Germany's unconditional surrender. Signed before Allied and Soviet commanders, the document ended the war in Europe and confirmed the final collapse of Nazi rule. During the Second World War, Tomei Torihama ran a small restaurant near Chirin Air Base, where young kamikaze pilots often spent their final hours. Known as the Mother of the Kamikaze, she comforted them before missions and later devoted her life to preserving their memory. In 1939, Joe Arity, a disabled man with an IQ reported as 46, was executed in Colorado for a murder he almost certainly did not commit. His confession was unreliable, he barely understood the charge, and Colorado granted him a full posthumous pardon 72 years later. This 1935 photograph is often described as showing a man after a lobotomy, an operation that severed connections in the brain's frontal lobes. Used to treat severe mental illness, it could leave patients emotionally flat, cognitively impaired, or permanently disabled for life. During Nazi Germany's euthanasia campaign, disabled children and adults were removed from institutions and killed as lives deemed unworthy. By August 1941, the Action T4 program had murdered about 70,000 people, while related killings continued throughout the war. In August 1969, 13-year-old Patty Coyle stands in Derry's Bogside, wearing a gas mask and holding a petrol bomb during 3 days of violent street fighting. Photographer Clive Limpkin captured an image that became an enduring symbol of the Troubles in Northern Ireland. In April 1945, women liberated from Bergen-Belsen sit beside makeshift cooking pots while piles of unburied victims remain behind them. The camp held tens of thousands in catastrophic conditions, and British soldiers found starvation, disease, and mass death upon arrival. In January 1910, the Seine rose more than 8 meters and flooded streets, rail tunnels, and basements across Paris, forcing residents to travel by boat. The disaster displaced thousands, disrupted the capital for weeks, and became known as the Great Flood of Paris citywide. In 1944, Red Army soldiers rushed past a wrecked German armored train during the fighting near Odessa as Soviet forces drive westward. The shattered rail fortress shows how armored trains became vulnerable to artillery, aircraft, and damaged tracks. In May 1986, a temporary barrier surrounded the shattered reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Soviet Ukraine. Behind it, crews worked amid radiation after the April explosion to contain debris and prepare the first concrete sarcophagus over the destroyed unit. In the early 1900s, Mademoiselle Gabrielle of Basel became a well-known European sideshow performer, despite being born without legs. Celebrated for her elegance and confidence, she built a successful career, appearing in theaters and traveling exhibitions across Europe. In 1942, Indian volunteers of the Free India Legion swear allegiance while training under German command during the Second World War. Formed from Indian prisoners of war, the unit backed Subhas Chandra Bose's campaign to end British rule and was later absorbed into Waffen-SS. In 1991, violinist Isaac Stern continued performing in Jerusalem as air raid sirens warned of an Iraqi chemical attack during the Gulf War. Audience members put on gas masks, but Stern stayed on stage and played Bach, turning the concert into a symbol of calm under threat. In 1977, women worked openly in an Iranian beauty salon, wearing Western-style clothing and uncovered hair before the Islamic Revolution reshaped public life. After 1979, mandatory dress rules dramatically transformed women's appearance and freedom in workplaces across Iran. During the 1918 influenza pandemic, people across the United States wore cloth masks in public as cities tried to slow transmission of the deadly virus. The outbreak infected roughly 1/3 of the world's population and killed at least 50 million people in 1918 and 1919. On December 19, 1964, 2 police officers cornered a robbery suspect as he tried to escape down a fire ladder above a narrow alley. One officer aimed his revolver while the other closed in from below, forcing the trapped man to surrender after his desperate getaway failed. In 1978, fashion designer Calvin Klein reunited with his 11-year-old daughter Marcy after kidnappers released her in New York. She had been abducted for ransom and freed safely, ending a terrifying ordeal that suddenly placed the private Klein family in national headlines. In the Soviet Arctic around 1950, a woman feeds a polar bear beside barrels and supplies outside a remote settlement. The scene captures the extraordinary closeness between people and wildlife in isolated northern outposts, where bears often approached camps in search of food. Write a comment on which photo you liked the most.